Recently, I came across the 7 tips video from the channel All Things Secured. While I agree with a couple of his points, the bulk of Josh's video was questionable. Some of his tips were just outright terrible security practices. Let's take a look at what Josh suggests and whether there are better alternatives.
One of the first things that you can do to create stronger security for yourself online is to set up a separate email address for your banking, investments, and other really highly sensitive online logins. Essentially, what I'm saying here is you don't want your primary email address. That's the one that you're using for all of your communications. Whenever you email somebody or you sign up for something, you don't want that to be the same as the email that you use for your logins for your bank and your investments.
This is actually a solid tip that everyone should be following. There's no reason why anyone should be using a single email address for everything they do online. It's not like it's against the law or costly to have multiple email addresses. Even from an organizational perspective, using separate email accounts keeps messages organized according to use case.
Now, thankfully, setting this up really isn't that hard. Just create a separate secret email account. You can do that in Gmail, just set up a new email account, or I suggest you open a private or encrypted email address through something like Tuda or Proton, which is what I use.
You're serious.
Aside from the fact that Google is a terrible company with terrible business practices, why would you even suggest Gmail? Especially when you list better options for privacy and security reasons. Josh also neglects to mention that Google may ask you to submit a phone number to verify this second email account, something which neither Proton nor Tuda require at sign-up.
If you were to follow me around nowadays, you would rarely ever see me pull out my credit card and swipe it or plug it into any of the kiosks where they're asking for my payments. And the main reason for that is that I don't want any of these retailers, any of these places to have my actual credit card number. Now, when you're doing this online, you can create a virtual credit card. You can do that through something like privacy.com that I've talked about before.
Here's the problem with digital card services like privacy.com and MySudo. They require very personal information to use them due to Know Your Customer laws, or KYC for short. This means these services are required to collect your name, address, phone number, date of birth, and social security number. On top of that, you must link your bank account to the service, either with your actual debit card number or by giving the routing and account numbers. Call me crazy, but giving a third-party sensitive personal information and access to my bank account sounds extremely sketchy. Creators like Josh, TechLore, The New Oil, and Naomi Brockwell can dress up these services all they want, using fancy marketing and buzzwords to make them appear safer. Which is ironic, since Naomi Brockwell uses this reason as a selling point for these services.
And yet, we freely hand that number out to almost anyone. Virtual credit cards allow you to put in place all kinds of parameters that stop those people pulling money from your account without your permission.
But at the end of the day, you're still handing out your personal information to another entity that you don't know and hoping they protect it like they promise. Thankfully, there are 2 alternatives that don't require you to surrender your identity or access to your bank account. I'm referring to cash and prepaid gift cards. Both can be used for physical purchases, and gift cards can also be used for online purchases. No personal data or bank account required.
But in your day-to-day life, it is very easy to set up tap to pay on something like your phone or whatever smartwatch you have. I know for a lot of people, there's maybe this immediate skepticism about the security of using tap to pay or the security of using something like your watch or something to tap over and make payment.
People are apprehensive for good reason. Whether it's Apple and Google spying on consumers or developers harvesting data through their apps, your smartphone isn't as safe as you believe it is.
But the reality is that when you put your card onto Google Pay or Apple Pay or something like that, when you tap on those little devices, it doesn't give over your actual credit card number. So if I'm paying for something at Starbucks using tap to pay, they're not getting my actual credit card number, they're just getting a token. If you were to actually look at it, you would see it's not your actual credit card number.
There are multiple problems with the tap to pay feature. By default, Apple and Google require the user to verify their identity using their Face ID, fingerprint, PIN code, or password every time they make a purchase. Unfortunately, both Apple and Google also allow users to bypass this security feature for the sake of convenience. On Apple, it's called Express Mode. And on Google, it's called Verify It's You. This bypass mode is geared towards using IDs, transit passes, and hotel keys. However, Apple and Google have extended the bypass to include payment methods as well. In other words, if your phone becomes lost or stolen, anyone could freely use the cards linked to the device. Unfortunately, the creepiness doesn't end there.
Shit gets deeper.
If your hotel key is linked, now anyone with your phone can enter your room. Even if your phone needs charged, cards using Express Mode can still be used for up to 5 hours under the Power Reserve feature. Unless the user manually initiates a shutdown in iOS, your cards are still usable with the Power Reserve feature. On the flip side, even dropping your phone could be catastrophic. If you accidentally drop your phone and it ends up breaking, you're still in a bad spot. Now you've lost the ability to travel, verify your identity, purchase anything, and access to your hotel room. You've even lost the ability to call any friends or family for help, unless you happen to know their phone numbers. At that point, you're basically screwed. By putting everything on your phone, you're creating a single point of failure by putting all your eggs in one basket. Carrying a small amount of cash or prepaid gift cards can still allow you to leave your bank and credit cards at home, all without the risk of completely losing access to your finances.
What most people don't realize is that you can create unique username emails alongside your unique, strong passwords, and that adds an even greater level of security to all of your online logins. Now, the challenge here is that it is really difficult and time-consuming to go back into the archive of what's probably hundreds of online logins to change that username email into something that's unique. But what you can do is set yourself up so that now going forward, every new account that you create has both a strong password and a unique username email.
This honestly just sounds like you're repeating your first tip in the video.
Essentially what I'm saying here is you don't want your primary email address. That's the one that you're using for all of your communications. Whenever you email somebody or you sign up for something, you don't want that to be the same as the email that you use for your logins for your bank and your investments.
The only difference is that you're applying it to any account, not just your finances. So technically, you're only offering 6 tips, not 7.
Set up a credit freeze. Essentially, whenever you're going to apply for more credit, whether that's a credit card, a loan, or anything like that, even sometimes it has to do with a background check, they're going to do what's called a credit pull. It could be a hard or a soft pull. When that happens, if you have a credit freeze, you're basically telling that credit bureau that they are not allowed to release your information and give the approval for that credit. So if somebody signs up for a credit card in your name or tries to access your credit to get a loan using your name, they won't be able to do so. And I know what you might be thinking. What if I need to set up a credit card? Or what if I'm going to buy a car and I need to, borrow money to do so? Well, it's very simple to go in and do what's known as thawing your credit freeze. Basically, it's putting that credit freeze on pause. I've done it multiple times and it has never been an issue for me.
And yet there's a glaring issue that he fails to address. Remember when he mentioned background checks?
Essentially, whenever you're going to apply for more credit, whether that's a credit card, a loan, or anything like that, even sometimes it has to do with a background check.
It's one thing to unfreeze your credit for loans or lines of credit. At most, you have to unfreeze your credit for a week. But what about background checks for jobs? Do you really think potential employers will sit around and wait for you to unfreeze your credit? Plus, you'll most likely have no idea when a company will choose to run their background check on you. Could be well over a month before they get to your application, let alone pull a credit report. And chances are good that you're applying to multiple companies simultaneously. Do you really expect people to constantly freeze and unfreeze their credit when they're hunting for a job? In fairness to Josh, I'm not saying it's terrible to freeze your credit. However, it's a bit dishonest to mention background checks, but then only discuss unfreezing credit for the sake of applying for loans.
I don't know if you've seen in the news, but there have been a lot of data breaches happening recently, including one that had over 2.9 billion records stolen.
Oh yes. The infamous National Public Data breach that happened fairly recently. If Josh actually did some digging, he would have known that most of those records were reported to be duplicates. So the number of impacted individuals was actually much lower. But of course, Josh isn't going to tell you that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to effectively shill Delete Me to his audience.
And that's why I use a service like Delete Me. Now, I've been using Delete Me for years now to find my personal information online and make removal requests on my behalf. And I've trusted them to do this because I've read their privacy policy and I like how they handle the data.
Seems awfully convenient that Josh failed to mention the recent study that showed the ineffectiveness of services like Delete Me. I'm guessing it's because Delete Me is actually sponsoring this video. Can't have annoying studies that may affect sales from Josh's audience. Let's also keep quiet on the fact that Delete Me isn't being honest about the number of websites it removes your data from, or that they're hiding other membership tier levels from customers.
Yeah, it's a big problem with Delete Me in my opinion that I forgot to bring up earlier, but they have this, if you go to the footer of their website and click on sites we remove from, they talk about the 750 plus data brokers that we find and remove data from. But if you go through the list, you could see a lot of these websites have little marks next to them, and in the footnotes, this is, as far as I know, the only place that these plans other than the standard plan are advertised at all on their marketing website. You can't even buy these plans. You looked in your account and there wasn't even a way to upgrade without contacting them, I believe. Support. Yeah. So if you look at most of these plans, or most of the sites on this page, a lot of them are only included in gold, diamond, or platinum plans. A lot of them are custom requests only, so they wouldn't be automatically removed by Delete Me. And if you total this up, it's only around 90 or so are actually included in the standard plan that is the only plan that's really readily available for purchase without contacting them. It, I think, is pretty misleading on Delete Me's end to advertise that they remove private information from all of these data brokers, whereas they don't really do that with the plans that the vast majority of people are purchasing. If you're purchasing for a business, for example, that's probably when these plans would be made available to you. And on this site they said that if you want custom requests you can contact them, but the extent of their automatic removals is quite a bit lower than I think their marketing would lead you to believe, and it's lower than a lot of these other services, which could be part of the reason they did so poorly in this result.
All right, for me, I'm not a big fan of going into an airport, a coffee shop, or any other public location and connecting directly to that Wi-Fi. Now, one of the ways that people get around that is by using a VPN, but the reality is that most public Wi-Fi is already slow. You add a VPN on top of that and it gets really slow.
This was honestly one of the worst points Josh makes in this video. In a video about cybersecurity tips, internet speed of public Wi-Fi is completely irrelevant. There are plenty of reasons to not use public Wi-Fi, including things such as evil twin Wi-Fi networks. And yet, Josh chooses something that has absolutely no bearing on the topic.
What an asshole.
What I like to do is that instead of connecting to the public Wi-Fi, I like to tether to my mobile data. I would rather know who I'm trusting when I'm connecting to the internet, which in this case would be my mobile provider. I know a lot of us maybe don't trust our mobile provider, but at least knowing who I'm using, I can know, okay, I'm going to use a VPN, or I want to make sure I know what I'm doing when I'm doing that. As opposed to public Wi-Fi, most of the time we don't even know who's implementing that public Wi-Fi. What company is it? And am I connecting to the right Wi-Fi anyway?
Right there. That's all you needed to get your point across. Other than padding out your video, I have no idea why you felt the need to include internet speeds into the argument.
Now, I admit that this one tip might be a little bit harder for us to implement, but most of us walk around with the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on our mobile devices constantly on. We never turn it off unless we go onto an airplane or something like that. Now, the fact is that when you have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled all the time, your phone is constantly looking for signals, searching for something to connect to, and that is an open threat vector that people could exploit. The biggest challenge here is obviously convenience. I mean, I want to be able to just put my headphones in and have it automatically connect to my phone, as opposed to getting into the settings and turning on the Bluetooth every time that I do that.
When it comes to whining about convenience, I'm not sure who's the biggest crybaby. Josh, Henry from TechLore, or Nate from the New Oil. You act like turning off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is such a huge inconvenience. It's literally a single swipe up or down, and the toggle switches are right there. And if that's too much for your delicate fingers, perhaps you'd be better off using wired headphones instead.
Or you could even set up a shortcut or an if this then that, where it says anytime you leave the location of either your home or your office, that Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are turned off, and then anytime that you are in those locations, that it's turned on.
And the boys over at Surveillance Report say my suggestions are unrealistic. The only people who will implement such a thing will be power users. The vast majority of people are not going to know how to set up this function in the first place, let alone actually use it.
All right, the last tip that I'll give here is a really easy one, and it has to do with phone theft. This is something that has become more and more common. People are having their phones stolen all the time, and we put so much on our phones that one, it's a threat if it is taken, not to mention the fact that it is really, really inconvenient for us to have to replace that and make sure that we're logging into everything. So,
hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Let me get this straight. Josh correctly states the problem of people relying too much on their phones. And yet his advice is to rely on their phones even more. Sorry, but that's some of the dumbest logic I've ever heard a YouTuber give to people. That's like TechLore levels of stupid.
When people spout BS, like signal is compromised, you're effectively saying that math isn't real.
First things first, I would make sure that you have a backup of your phone, whether you do that with some kind of cloud service or you connect it to your computer and manually back up your phone once every couple months maybe. But that's important.
Yes, backups are very important. However, I wouldn't rely on storing backups in the cloud. We've already seen some consequences of relying on these online services. Unless you're hosting your own cloud storage, it's best to just stick with keeping your backups locally.
The other side of this, though, is to set up what each device has in terms of stolen device protection. So iOS, as of iOS 17, has something that is literally called stolen device protection. So if you go into your settings, into security and privacy and scroll all the way down, you can turn on stolen device protection. For Android, they have theft detection lock, which is its own thing that you can turn on. They are also trying to use AI to determine when a phone has been taken. This is all part of just an effort to be able to make sure that if that phone is stolen, no data, no personal information, no damage can be done to you by the person that has taken that device, and hopefully that device becomes just unusable.
I'm sorry? Did Josh seriously just tell viewers to hope that the extra security works?
And hopefully that device becomes just unusable.
So you're telling people to trust their phones with all of their accounts and personal information and just cross their fingers that the phone is secured enough from thieves. That is the dumbest line of logic I've ever heard. Especially from someone claiming to be involved in cybersecurity.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
If you're worried about data being stolen from your phone, the best practice is to not put that data on your phone in the first place. Thieves can't steal your data if it isn't on your phone to begin with. Your phone should only contain what you absolutely need on the device, and nothing more than that.